The truth behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Imagine this. You and your friends are driving through the quiet back roads of Texas. The sun is scorching, the air is heavy, and there's nothing but endless fields and empty highways. Then in the middle of nowhere you stumble upon an old farmhouse. The door creaks open, and inside something is very, very wrong. This is the eerie feeling that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre captures so well. But what if I told you that this horrifying tale wasn't just a creation of Hollywood? That parts of it were inspired by real events? And that this very movie was banned in several countries for being too disturbing? Let's uncover the truth. The inspiration behind the nightmare. The year was 1974. Director Tobe Hooper wanted to make a film that would shake audiences to their core. He had heard stories about a man who lived in isolation, collecting strange things and creating a world of his own. This man wasn't from Texas, but his story would become the backbone of one of horror's most infamous legends. That man was Ed Gein. Gein lived in a small town in Wisconsin, far from the Texas roads seen in the film. He was quiet, reserved, and largely kept to himself. But when authorities entered his home in the 1950s, they discovered something so shocking that it would inspire multiple horror films, including Psycho, The Silence of the Lambs, and of course, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But here's the thing. The movie isn't a direct retelling of Gein's life. Instead, it took elements of his eerie existence and twisted them into something new. The idea of a man wearing masks made from unusual materials? That came from Gein. The isolated farmhouse filled with strange objects? That, too, was inspired by his story. The film that went too far when the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released, audiences didn't know what to expect. Some thought it was based on a true story. Others were simply unprepared for what they saw on screen. The film wasn't just another horror movie. It felt real. It was shot with a raw, documentary-like style that made people uneasy. The actors' fear seemed genuine, and the setting felt like something you could stumble upon if you took the wrong turn on an empty road. Some viewers were so disturbed that they walked out of the theater. Others demanded that the movie be banned, and in several countries, it was. But why? What was it about this film that made it so controversial? The secrets of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The air was thick, the heat was unbearable, and the cast was exhausted, but the cameras kept rolling. What happened behind the scenes of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was just as intense as the movie itself. And for some, it felt even more terrifying. Welcome back to the story of one of the most infamous horror films of all time. Filming A Nightmare, Tobe Hooper had a vision. He didn't want this to feel like just another horror movie. He wanted it to feel real. And that meant filming in ways that pushed both the cast and audience to their limits. The entire movie was shot in the brutal Texas heat, with temperatures soaring past 100 degrees. The farmhouse, which looked eerie on screen, was even worse in real life. Small, suffocating, and filled with props that made it feel disturbingly authentic. The actors wore the same clothes for weeks, and by the end of filming, those outfits were stiff with sweat and dirt. But the real challenge? The long, exhausting days. Some scenes took over 16 hours to film. The exhaustion you see on the actors' faces? That wasn't acting, it was real. Every moment of fear, every nervous glance, it all came from a place of genuine discomfort. And maybe that's why so many people thought the movie was based on a true story. It didn't feel like a film. It felt like something that could actually happen. Why the movie was banned. When the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was finally released, the reaction was immediate and intense. Some audience members walked out. Others demanded it be pulled from theaters. And in several countries, including the UK, Germany, and Australia, authorities ruled that the film was simply too disturbing for public viewing. It was either banned outright or heavily censored. Even in the United States, some theaters refused to show it. In fact, some places ran misleading newspaper ads, claiming the movie was based on true events just to increase the hype. And it worked. The controversy made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre even more famous. The birth of a horror icon. Despite all the backlash, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't disappear. It only grew in popularity. Tobe Hooper's raw, documentary-style approach changed horror filmmaking forever. It proved that a low-budget film could be just as terrifying, if not more so, than Hollywood blockbusters. It inspired countless horror directors from Wes Craven, A Nightmare on Elm Street, to Rob Zombie. And then there's Leatherface. Unlike other horror villains who talk, plan, or taunt their victims, Leatherface is different. He doesn't speak, he doesn't think about what he's doing. He just acts, making him one of the most unpredictable and terrifying horror icons in history. Even decades later, the legend of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre still haunts audiences. Closing statement. So, was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre simply ahead of its time? Or was the controversy justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love uncovering the dark history behind banned horror films, make sure to subscribe for more.